Hi everyone, I'm back with another video for Season 28, and today I want to talk about some pretty crazy stuff. So if you have followed the PTR updates and the patch notes, you might know that Season 28 seems to be pretty busted. I'm not just talking about the potion powers with the counted pylons everywhere that enable you to clear 150 in 2 minutes on every single build. That is obviously going to get removed, but I'm talking about the season theme in general and some of the crazy also shrine buffs that you can get. So if you look at this season theme here, there are a bunch of different extra damage bonuses, damage reduction bonuses, a few quality of life things, some really strong utility choices depending on the build, like CC immunity, passability, which is illusory boots, resource on crit that I'm going to go into in a moment. And then you have the potion powers here at the bottom. So this is the Triune Circles, that's the Season 18 theme. So you spawn 1 out of 3 rings. Especially the purple one is important. It's a 100% damage bonus that stacks with Oculus Ring. It looks exactly like Oculus Ring. So you usually prefer that over the other, but they can go and overlap. And here's the random shrines and pylons. So this one is going to change in some way, most likely, because right now it's just busted and it completely removes the game, basically. So we assume that, yeah, most likely we're not going to see any pylons, or maybe like a very watered down version of pylons, and we get the shrines instead for the most part. So I have this summed up here right now. This is like the overall damage buff. If you look at what you get from the tree, and you see that everyone is going to be roughly 2.5 tiers stronger against all targets, roughly 4 tiers stronger against elites, and 5.5 tiers stronger against bosses. So this is a pretty significant buff, around on the power level of what Ephemerals were doing, maybe a bit less than that on its own. Then comes the damage reduction. So you can see that in Season 28, and this is also something I noticed when playing on a PTR, you're going to be omega tanky. This is like the first time in history, basically, that we're going to get more tanky, actually, from a season theme. Usually what happens is we get some insane damage buffs, you go up like 5 or 10 tiers or something, and everyone just gets way squishier. But this time it's exactly the reverse. We go higher tiers, but we get even tankier in the process. So you see here, against all damage, against all targets, you take 63% damage, almost a third, over a third less. Against elites, you take less than half damage. When you get the protection shrine from the potion, you take 1/3 of the normal damage. It's insane. And then when you press the potion, you also have this like AoE debuff for 10 seconds that reduces damage taken even further. So you get like 1/4 of the regular damage when that happens. So this is absolutely busted. And a lot of builds will be like either invincible, or you take certain like super greedy offensive choices, dropping Unity, dropping even Band of Might on Bard builds or something like that to squeeze out even more damage on the higher end. So this is how that's gonna go. Yeah, and then you have the extra effects, the CC immunity. This affects especially the int classes a lot because they usually don't have CC immunity at all. So wizards, witch doctors, necros will really benefit from this, especially those builds that are very susceptible to getting vortex in and dying, or where you have to like stand still and channel, like Nova, for example. Illusory Boots is very useful on some builds. This effect alone, for example, on a Demon Hunter, you can drop like Vault from every single build, and you take Smoke Screen instead. Gives you way more defense, gives you potentially way more squirts uptime, these kind of things. On some melee builds, you can just casually walk through the enemies to go into the Oculus Rings. That is also really helpful in a push. Then we have the resource on crit. So most builds don't really benefit from that, but there are some. And for example, some of the stronger builds like Star Pact Wizard or Raker Barb, they're gonna profit a lot from this. I actually tried this out; it's pretty busted. Yeah, you can get crazy results of that, especially if you combine this with the shrines. So there's one shrine in the game in particular that has a much more powerful effect than any other shrine. And I guess you know which one I'm getting at. It's the Empowered Shrine. It gives you halved cooldowns and double resource generation. And with the Gloss of Worship in Season 28, you press a potion, you get a 10-minute shrine. And yeah, while doing the Rift, you're gonna press a potion like every most likely 32 seconds because of convention cycles. So you're gonna get like another almost 20 uses of your potion until that Empowered Shrine runs out. So it's almost guaranteed you're going to get a new one on that point, basically. So what is actually going to happen, at least on the higher end of pushing, is that you're going to start the rift, you're going to press your potion, and you're going to get Empowered Shrine. And if not, you're going to leave, or maybe you're going to wait like, 30 seconds, try again, or something like that on a really good map. But the point is, the high-end builds are going to rely on Empowered Shrines, and that is going to be absolutely crazy, because now, suddenly, you don't need any cooldown anymore on most builds. Most builds that require a Zodiac don't need a Zodiac anymore. Let's say, for example, Wave of Light. Wave of Light, very powerful build, S tier, usually in every single season. You have a Zodiac, you have a Unity in there. You don't need either of those two rings anymore because you don't need a cooldown and you're Omega tanky. So suddenly you could play Legacy of Nightmare, Wave of Light, and you get an extra legendary gem. That's like +3 tiers just on its own. And you have builds like Star Pact Wizard, as I mentioned, that benefits from the resource on crit. And all of those resources on crit procs are also doubled from a shrine effect. But it gets even better. So because you also get all this cooldown, you can play like a reverse Archon Bazooka Wizard in solo. And it's like super smooth now. You're tanky as hell. You can play ranged. You don't need to rely on Ancient Powerful Defenders. I don't even need to roll cooldown very much. I just took like Evocation passive and an Enchantress, and that was basically it. And I had a easy peasy 32 seconds reverse Archon cycle. I was, destroying this 150 here. This was kind of like just a test run, but yeah, on some of these nukes, I was literally like 2 cycling yellow packs on this build. It was crazy. And this means that, for example, a lot of wizard builds are going to run reverse Archon 32-second cycles, no problem on the higher end. Even stuff like Typhon potentially with Hydra, or, there's like the Frozen Orb build, there's Veer. All these builds that could require a lot of cooldown suddenly don't need it anymore. And you go like, full standard area damage everywhere. And you destroy everything, basically. So this is how that is going to go. For example, on the Barbarians, you have Wrath of the Berserker on some builds. You try to stack a lot of cooldown reduction. For example, Whirlwind. You don't really need a Zodiac anymore. Or, for example, Frenzy gets Perma Wrath now, which is something that a lot of people always requested for that build. Well, there you go. You just get Empowered Shrine. Or, as I mentioned, something like Rakabab, that is already like one of the most powerful pushing builds in the game. Suddenly, with Empowered Shrine, you get this extra resource. You get the Perma Wrath. You get lots of toughness. You can literally just stand there in bigger pools, as you can see here, and you can throw rocks over and over without charging. So not only do you benefit from the extra uptime of all your buffs, but you can also have a lot more DPS uptime instead of like charging around and refilling your resources. So it gets even crazier than that on some of those builds. And like I was able to do like 150 here with almost no trouble and like 2k Paragon with this build on some kind of mediocre rift. Or for example, on the Demon Hunter, I mentioned that you can drop Vault on basically every single build now because you just walk through enemies and you have Smokescreen instead. But almost every single Demon Hunter build also runs Dawn. And well, guess what? You don't need a Dawn anymore on any of those builds, basically. You get like 2 more cooldown rolls or so, you drop Dawn and you get an extra weapon. So in the case of, for example, God Demon Hunter, you have like, an easy time keeping up your Squirt's Necklace because now you just slot in a Fortress Ballista. On an Impale Demon Hunter, you get an Echoing Fury, for example. So once you start killing stuff, you just go absolutely crazy. So this is these kind of things that we're gonna see, especially on the high end of leaderboards in Season 28. Now, obviously, I understand that on the casual end, not everyone wants to make their build and fish for an Empowered Shrine. But the reality is that the chances of getting one are actually not really that low. And as long as you're not running a build that completely doesn't work without it, you can just like start a rift, get a good run, and then you just keep pressing your potion and eventually get that Empowered Shrine, and you will still greatly benefit from it. So, for example, something like the Marauder Demon Hunter. This build works just fine even without the Empowered Shrine, but once you get it, you get the Perma Vengeance, you're tanky, you have more Wolf uptime, you can put the sentries wherever you want, and these kind of things, and it just feels a lot better. Versus, for example, these Reverse Archon Wizard builds that I mentioned, that straight up won't work at all when you don't have the required cooldown threshold. So in those cases, it might become more fishy. But especially if you consider that there is a high chance that you're going to probably even remove all the pylon effects from the potion and you're just going to be left with the shrines, for example, there's actually a really good chance to get Empowered Shrine. It's going to be like either 1 in 5 or 1 in 6. depending on whether they want to keep, for example, the Fortune Shrine, which is not actually a shrine in the game anymore. It's just part of this potion effect. So that might also get removed. And then there's just Frenzy, Protection, Empowered, Fleeting, and finally the Enlightened Shrine. And I think that's it. So the chances of getting it either as the first potion or very early in the run are really high. Now all of this will obviously affect the solo pushing tier list in particular pretty significantly. So this Saturday I had a meeting for like 10 hours with Rob and Northwar, and we went through the entire solo tier list here on Maxwell, and we decided, we tried to theory craft, like what will you do under all those circumstances with the extra toughness, with the pass ability, and then potentially with those empowered shrines on each of those builds. So that was a pretty funny and interesting meeting. And yeah, we figured out some pretty crazy stuff from most of these builds, some of which I have just discussed. So it will most likely mean that there will be builds that will benefit more than others with Empowered Shrine versus non-Empowered Shrine, of course, because of the stuff I mentioned, because of the greedy choices you can make. And there is going to be like a bit of like a difference between the try-hard setups and the regular setups, most likely. And yeah, realistically, we're going to do something like, there's going to be two solo push setups. Basically the kind of normal version and then the Empowered Shrine version. That is going to be like, for the high-end push, basically. But yeah, it's going to be pretty insane for some of those builds. And we calculated that the minimum average like tier buff that we get from the season theme here, including especially the shrines and not really any pylons and stuff, is going to be somewhere like around 8 tiers for the build where it does the least. And I think it goes upwards of like 16, 18 tiers or something like that for the build where it does the most. In general, the power level of Season 28 is already extremely high, and I have shown that on the PTR. I have done runs that I was not pressing the potion at all. I did not get any of the shrine buffs, none of the Triune rings and these kind of things. And you can really feel how powerful you are in Season 28, how tanky you are. It's absolutely crazy. And this means that most of these builds that you see here, all the way down to C tier, will clear 150 next season, at least on the higher end. I mean, obviously, S tier builds are going to do it way easier, way faster. So this is like, day 1 to day 3 or something. And then you have like this stuff that's going to do it like maybe a week in, or maybe 2 weeks. And then, like over time, there's going to be like more and more builds that will all clear GR 150 solo once you approach like a few thousand paragons. And then on the very high end, even like basically all of the C tiers will do it eventually. This is just how crazy it is in Season 28. And there's almost not a single leaderboard that will not have 150 solo clear by the end of the season. Obviously, all of this assumes that we're not going to see any significant nerfs to the season theme. And I kind of doubt that we will. So this is kind of like the big season. Everyone is hyped to be Omega powerful. And I think Blizzard knows that. And Blizzard knows Diablo 4 is coming. And, people have been discussing about this conduit power, and everyone wants easy 2 minutes, 150 on every single build with no skills pressed on besides the potion button. Obviously, that is not happening. But in general, as I mentioned, this is like the strongest season ever. Like we are at the peak of Diablo 3, basically. Every single build is going to be so strong, and especially when it comes to the high-end pushing, especially when it comes to getting the right rifts, getting this empowered shrine. And as I have shown earlier in the video, even if you leave out the potion buffs, you get significant damage bonuses, you get significant toughness bonuses, and you get all these like extra, they're not just even quality of life effects, they're definitely useful effects depending on the build that allow you to do even higher tiers, because suddenly you can play completely different, you can slot in different skills, you can get an extra choice on your cube or whatever. And this is not even like included at all in this like tier calculation here, for example. Naturally, I'm going to be working on a lot of guides for Season 28 for you guys, for most of the top builds at the very least. I'm going to cover all the classes, various builds. I have tested a lot of stuff on the PTR, and you can bet we're going to have some updated leveling guides for you with or without the challenge with cash and these kind of things. So when it comes to the Maxwell guides, a lot of people keep asking me already when you are going to see the updates and stuff. Please be patient. We don't even have the final patch notes. So yeah, we are theory crafting, we are preparing, but of course, without the patch notes, we can't really, push out any final updates. We can't really do a full tier list because we have to see what Blizzard will actually do. So right now this just assumes that there's going to be a significant nerf to the pylons in some way, and outside of that we don't know if they're going to tweak any of the numbers for the passive altar bonuses, if they're going to maybe change some of the effects around or remove something or so. So everything I said is still a little bit up in the air. But of course you're going to get the guides in time, usually like around a week before the season starts or so, which by the way we don't know exactly when, but it should be soon. Most likely by the end of the month. And that's also it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope that you're looking forward to Season 28 as much as I am. I think it's going to be an amazing season. I'm really hyped for the renewed buffed builds and obviously the new Natalia. And I think just in general the season theme is great. So let's see how that will go. Hope you like this one and see you guys next time.